Some of you might wonder, when did a true blue Mormon boy like me first decide that Joseph was telling the truth, that he did not practice polygamy, even though the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints says that he did? I was reading the official history of the Church, which was compiled by the Church in the 1800s. I came across this quote, which it said was from Joseph Smith. Gave instructions to try those persons who were preaching, teaching, or practicing the doctrine of plurality of wives. For according to the law I hold the keys of this power in the last days. For there is never but one on earth at a time on whom the power and its keys are conferred. And I have constantly said that no man shall have but one wife at a time, unless the Lord directs otherwise. The quote, as given in the Church's history, apparently shows that Joseph supported polygamy, and claims that he was given power from God to do it. This fits perfectly with Brigham Young's narrative of polygamy, but I wanted to see where the quote originally came from. I went to the manuscript history of the Church on the Joseph Smith Papers website and found the quote to be the same. It said the quote came from Joseph Smith's journal, which was kept by his scribes. I found scans of the original journal on the Joseph Smith Papers, and to my surprise, I found out that what Joseph actually said was quite a bit different than what ended up in the Church history. Smith's journal for 5 October 1843 reads, "Gave instruction to try those who were preaching, teaching the doctrine of plurality of wives. On this law, Joseph forbids it, and the practice thereof. No man shall have but one wife." In his journal, Joseph unequivocally condemns plural marriage. How did the statement that made its way into the Church history come to quote Joseph as saying the opposite of what was in his journal? After further searching on the Joseph Smith Papers website, I found the draft history of the Church, compiled by appointees of Brigham Young after Joseph Smith's death, from original sources. I found something startling. The quote had been copied into the draft history, but with large empty spaces between some of the lines, with a notation on the side, "To be revised." I have to note that this was during the time when, according to Brigham Young's own journal, he commenced revising the history of the Church. And revised it was, as a person with a different handwriting than the copyist crossed out and added words, reversing the meaning of what was in Joseph's journal, and changing the official history of the Church to support Brigham Young's polygamy narrative. The quote now said, "Gave instructions to try those persons who were preaching, teaching, or practicing the doctrine of plurality of wives." On this is crossed out, added, "For according to the law, I hold the keys of this power in the last days, for there is never but one on earth at a time on whom the power and its keys are conferred. And I have constantly said, on this law, and Joseph forbids it, and the practice thereof are crossed out. No man shall have but one wife, at a time is added, and, unless the Lord directs otherwise, is added." Incidentally, my dear viewer, according to his journal, Joseph said this while walking up and down the street with his scribe. There are two possible interpretations of this. One is that Joseph, tired of being stuck in his office, was having a walking meeting. The other is that by walking in a public place, Joseph was intending to be overheard saying that he forbids plural marriage. This is significant because the explanation advanced by Brian C. Hales and other polygamy defenders is that Joseph's frequent teachings against polygamy were, quote, carefully worded denials. But if, like the LDS Church and its apologists, you don't believe Joseph and think he was practicing plural marriage, then there are only two options for this quote. If it was a walking meeting, then Joseph was giving these instructions for the ears of his scribe, Willard Richards. But if Joseph was walking up and down the street intending to be heard denying plural marriage while he's secretly practicing plural marriage, then that's not a carefully worded denial. That's a deliberate lie. As always, the position of the LDS Church on polygamy makes Joseph Smith into a nonsensical liar in order to defend Brigham Young. To summarize, these deletions and additions made by Brigham Young et al. Completely reverse the meaning of the original entry in Joseph Smith's journal. I cannot see an innocent reason for altering the history in this manner. If you can, please share in the comments. Until then, I can't help but agree with the original sources instead of the altered history of the Church. As always with polygamy, it ultimately comes down to whether someone believes Joseph Smith or Brigham Young. I believe Joseph.